acknowledging the traditional owners of all of the countries that we might be on. I'm on beautiful Darug country. You might want to put in the chat which country you're on. Think about the traditional owners of the lands on which you are currently for this meeting. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to acknowledge any Aboriginal people in this room today. So today we have a really interestingly diverse morning. We're going to be talking about foreign interference in research, and I'm going to let Matthew and Shasta both introduce themselves and the topic. And then we're going to follow that by two of our SPADS recipients. Virginia Stultz is going to talk about her SPAD grant and what she used it for and what's come out of it. And Lisa Wong will also do the same. So without further ado, Matthew and Shasta, I'm going to leave you guys to introduce yourself and the topic, and feel free to share slides and continue. And I should just say, we are recording this for anybody who's on the meeting today.
Thank you, Hannah, and greetings from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation here in lovely Erskineville today. So greetings everybody. My name is Matthew Hunter, and I'm joined today by my colleague Shasta Khan. Both of us make up the foreign arrangements team here at Western Sydney University. And what the foreign arrangements team does is we're a team that's been at the university now for about 14 months, and we were employed essentially to target a few legislative pieces and ensure some compliance and more risk awareness and due diligence at Western around the engagement with foreign entities. So today, specifically, we're going to be talking about foreign interference in research, giving a little bit of background about the Australian Foreign Relations Act, which has come about since 2019, building a little bit more awareness around foreign engagement, and cover off a few areas of concern and a few areas of risk in relation to research. So starting off, just giving a quick overview of what is foreign interference. And so by the definition, foreign interference occurs when activity is carried out by or on behalf of a foreign actor, which are coercive, covert, deceptive, or corrupting, and are contrary to Australia's sovereignty, values, and national interests. Very complex piece of terminology there. Essentially, when we're talking about foreign interference, we're looking at the way foreign entities are potentially changing within the university scope, changing the way that academics and students are able to conduct themselves on campus. And we see this through a few different ways. So potentially passive censorship in classrooms, where students or staff feel like they can't speak about specific topics without gaining the ire of foreign colleagues or foreign entities. Active censorship of students and staff, so where students and staff have been spoken out against for sharing their beliefs. Harassment of academics, prevention of freedom of expression and academic freedoms, and a few other areas like IP theft, foreign talent program, predatory journals, and cyber threats and intrusions. So just giving a little bit of a background about the sector and foreign influence here at Western. So again, in 2019, there was a piece of legislation that came up called the Australian Foreign Relations Act. Because of AFRA, there was a group that was created called the University Foreign Interference Task Force, which worked closely with the Commonwealth, namely branches of government like DFAT, the Attorney General's Office, Department of Education, and Home Affairs, essentially managing how the university sector is engaging with the threats of foreign interference. 5 key areas that UFIT manages, which is governance and risk frameworks, due diligence, communication and education, cybersecurity, and knowledge sharing. On top of that, and as I mentioned within our team's name, we're called the Foreign Arrangements Team because predominantly the main area that we were managing here at Western was this reporting side of the Australian Foreign Relations Act that looked at the need for universities and other public entities to report when we're entering into partnerships with foreign entities. We won't talk about that too much today, only because of the nature of this workshop, but we are always happy to come out and speak to other business units about any of the compliance that we look after or about any of the other topics that we go through today. So just briefly, a little bit more about foreign arrangements. So essentially, we use the terminology of foreign arrangements a bit, and that's because, again, it's the main remit of our role here at Western in building more comprehensive reporting processes to meet our compliance requirements under the UFIT guidelines and under the foreign arrangement scheme. Within the more nitty-gritty of the foreign arrangement scheme is this reporting aspect, and while our focus is shifting now towards more in line with supporting academic freedoms and awareness for staff of foreign interference, the reporting side is still relevant to ensure that we're maintaining compliance under that scheme. And just for a quick little definition, essentially a foreign arrangement is an agreement entered into by a domestic public entity, so in this case it would be Western Sydney University, with a foreign public entity or a foreign non-autonomous entity. To date, we've only notified DFAT of 250 arrangements. So over the past 2 years or over the past 14 months, it's only been about 30 additional arrangements that we've submitted. There was a June 10th deadline where we basically had to capture the last 3 years of arrangements that we had entered into. And that's where we got the 250 from. And what makes those arrangements notifiable is whether the institution that we're partnering with has an autonomy status. So if they're non-autonomous, then essentially they're fine. No, if they're not autonomous, then they are not fine because they're under the remit of the government. The governance structure of the institution also demonstrates whether or not there's potentially a reporting requirement. So say, for example, if there's significant government influence over the governance structure of that institution. Different countries have pieces of legislation that also allow the government to control how different institutions run. So whether it's within research requirements, defense, staffing, et cetera, as well as direct government partnerships. So for example, Western Sydney University has a few partnerships with the Ministry for Defence in the UK. We would be reporting those types of arrangements. And a few other areas that we manage in particular. So looking after some cybersecurity legislation here at Western, critical infrastructure, which is another area of legislation that we're looking at. 2 pieces of defense projects, one called the Defense Industry Security Program and looking after defense export controls and autonomous sanctions. But going more specifically into the risks associated with research, given the nature and given the focus of research here at Western Sydney, one of the large concerns that we have is around the protection of IP, academic freedoms, and the enablement of staff to be able to conduct research without the fear of being impacted by foreign governments or external forces. Within the foreign arrangements scheme and the Australian Foreign Relations Act, a large focus has been put on the way academics have been coerced into undertaking different areas of study or changing what their research is focused on or changing the outcomes of their research through different processes like blackmail, harassment threats, as well as staff being solicited to work on specific projects and to have their research managed to reach a different conclusion than what they would if they were in a completely free environment to conduct research as they need. And then finally, again, another one of the large focuses were raising staff awareness around IP theft and cyber threat issues. And you'll all see this with the constant training that we have to do every 12 months around cybersecurity and cyber awareness. One such area that we'll just touch on is around predatory publishing as well. I'm not too sure how familiar everybody is with the concept of predatory publishing, but per this definition, predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. And this falls within the scope of foreign interference, as we're seeing a lot of predatory publishing taking part from entities in foreign countries, where they are essentially reaching out to academics here in Australia, getting them to submit journals for publishing and either taking that publishing and publishing it under somebody else's name, or just taking that IP to use for external practices. Predatory publishing is something that we are seeing growth in, and since the start of COVID, particularly with an increase in cyber threats and cyber crimes taking place, predatory publishing, as well as the number of academic articles that have been increasing over the past few years, has definitely taken a bit of a forefront. And Western Sydney has not been innocent of this. So there's 2 case studies that have happened over the past few years in relation to predatory publishing. One was where we had a PhD examiner who found some papers in a thesis that they were examining had been published in journals that they were unaware of. It demonstrated a change in the quality of what publications were allowed by Western Sydney for staff and students to be undertaking, and it led to a review of HDR policies to allow us to understand a little bit more about why our HDR students and why our staff were undertaking publishing with different journals that were not considered to be at our standard. The second case study was that a PhD student was publishing papers unrelated to their PhD project. They had done around 10 publications themselves for a few different journals. It turned out they were part of a publishing consortium, which had involved HDR students from a few other universities from Australia and from a few other countries. And the idea of this was to try and build a research track record so that these students could get favored immigration status for the Global Talent Visa Program. And that was managed specifically by the school that oversaw this process. And the reason, again, why predatory publishing becomes important is obviously for a lot of academics, as the need for reaching those publishing quotas come up, staff sometimes are encouraged or enticed into publishing within journals that are not necessarily, I don't want to say to Western Sydney standing, but may potentially not be reputable sources themselves. Another thing to keep aware of with this is also in terms of keeping yourself and the data that you have safe, particularly for nursing and midwifery, health sciences, medicine, things such as healthcare data obviously has a protected status in terms of the information and data that we have to secure. ITDS themselves have a website specifically dedicated to cybersecurity. They run cybersecurity workshops and information sessions for staff, and there is a knowledge base article here, KB001326, which will go through the kinds of data that have legal requirements due to their handling and data safety that we would suggest that all staff have a look at, just to understand what our obligations are and how to take care of that data. So that's a lot of boring stuff from me. I'm going to hand over to Shaista, my colleague, who will take us through a few little case studies and ask a few questions of the staff as we talk about it. Shaista, if you would.
Sure. Thank you, Matthew. And good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here from the Darug Nation of the Gomeroi clan in Western Sydney. The previous slides that Matthew shared with you, they identified some different forms of foreign interference that can manifest in our work. So we will now discuss 2 case studies so that you can, sort of put them in context. And I'm sure as academics, you value the importance of freedom of speech and meaningful discourse, which is, of course, an integral part of teaching and learning, the process. But there may be situations where sometimes this is compromised. So here, let's look at case study 1. And what this talks about is a teaching staff at an Australian university from the School of Economics receives reports from students that they do not feel safe expressing their views on sensitive topics in class or during their assignments. And some students actually feel that they may receive threats, or they are already receiving threats. They feel intimidated, and there's a lot of surveillance. One student confided in their tutor that during a class where she participated in a group discussion on impacts of a particular economic policy on a foreign country, she overheard a group of students discuss reporting her to a foreign country's consulate. So the student now avoids sensitive discussions in class, even though her tutor may penalize in a grade assessment for not participating. And this situation can become worse when there are online classes because they can be recorded by other students. So the academic staff at that university recognizes that there are reports of self-censorship. Here, I would like you to just take a moment and maybe reflect. I'm very conscious of the time, but still, just think about, have you witnessed any such incidents? And if you did, what would you do? So, yeah, if you would like to comment, and then we can move on to.
People can also write things in the chat if they feel more comfortable with that. But
I think for the sake of timing, if anybody does want to provide any responses back, just type it into the chat and we can talk about that during the question section at the end.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so we'll just move on to the next slide then. And so the mitigation strategy, of course, every university has its policies of students' code of conduct and all that. The staff met with the university administrators to discuss how they can provide a safe learning environment. And one of the strategies that they used was that at the beginning of each unit, teaching staff will talk to students about university's commitment to freedom of speech and academic freedom, highlight what kind of behaviors are expected and what consequences could there be of misconduct and any harassment or bullying. And the second thing that they thought would be useful is providing students alternative modes of participation without penalty and allowing their work to be submitted anonymously, consider whether instructions can be issued to students to minimize or even ban students recording classes when sensitive topics are being discussed. So, these were some of the measures that were taken. I guess if there are any comments to the previous case study, feel free to, sort of put them in the chat section. Now, this case study is something which is more intensive, actually, that exposes different elements of foreign interference. And as I just go through it, I would like you to, just to sort of see if you can identify any red flags. So there's a PhD student at an Australian university who is, invited to attend an overseas conference. This student is very much at the end of their research, and the research is on new agribusiness drone capabilities in partnership with the university in New Zealand. This research has been ongoing for 4 years and entering its final stages, with a patent being created to assist Australian and New Zealand farmers manage their large station properties. So the student has been invited, the travel is being paid for the conference organizers, by the conference organizers, the foreign government department, with all flights, accommodation, meals, incidentals covered for the PhD students. It's quite an exciting time for that PhD student. And he's also invited, he or she is also invited to sort of present live examples of his current study, as this was of most interest to the academics and commercial attendees. So the student attends that conference and travels to the third country, bringing his university laptop, and uses a remote access card to log into his account during the presentation. Now, during the event, the remote access information is captured by a foreign actor. So an actor can be an individual, an organization, and a permanent access link to the university system and to the student's research established. Within a month of returning, the student's research has been copied and prototypes are developed, appearing on the open market. The drone technology is also adapted by the foreign country for use in military operations. The PhD student discovers this through a contact from the conference who also had their research project copied and replicated. Right, so as you can see, that a very simple attending a conference can get quite tricky there. So I'm not sure if you were able to identify some threats, but here are the ones that, that are listed for the case study. So he, of course, immediately raises with his supervisor before first approaching the New Zealand university or the partner, and the supervisor escalates the information to the chief information security officer and undertakes to support the student and the research. So now they have to see as to what are the potential threats that the university and the partners have been exposed to. First of all, of course, is the hostile cybersecurity threat of any open links to the systems. Managing communication with research teams in the university. So now they have to think of a strategy as to how they will break this news to the university. Research teams, managing contact with the New Zealand University and their research partners. Any damage to the university's reputation and to the partner's reputation. And also, since this was a sensitive technology, whether export control technology has departed Australia physically or electronically, and whether Australia's export controls legislation may have been breached. So the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, contacts ASIO and the Australian Cybersecurity Centre for assistance, immediately locking down their remote access service, impacting hundreds of academic staff and thousands of students. It is discovered that many network drives have been infiltrated through the unauthorized connection, as the researcher had access to dozens of his peers' research projects through the open networking sharing practice. So, you can see there have been a lot of threats that the university is now exposed to. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So what was, a lot of damage may have already occurred. Of course, prototypes are there, and research is being compromised. And the Vice Chancellor then arranges a video conference first with the New Zealand counterparts and informs them about the breach and the outcome. So both countries, both partners, and then review the policies and procedures relating to communication, developing communication strategy, remote access, reviewing the existing remote access practices, and the system administration, access and travel, export controls, travel approvals. So lots of areas were, and the university already had some policies in place, but they were reviewed again for future to minimize such incidents. So the case study in some ways very much sums up the complexity of the work that we are doing in the foreign arrangements team that we are assigned for. While we're looking at compliance to foreign arrangements legislation to avoid national security risks, the paramount concern is the safety of the university staff, safeguarding the integrity of the work and the university and its partners' reputations. So I hope that this has been useful in sort of relating to the kind of scenarios that can come up if we do not take, the due diligence and are not risk aware.
So I'll just jump
yes.
in real quick
Sure.
based on the questions in the comments.
Mm.
So Virginia, you're 100% right. Virginia stated that you should be reporting to the supervisor and dean in the first instance, and they should be your first point of call within the context of any incident taking place. We have been working closely with the DVC, the Vice Chancellor, and the complaints team to identify and evaluate how the processes are in place to deal with issues like this. And then segueing into Hannah's question about if there is any international legal recourse in these matters. Chances are no, depending on whether or not the researcher or the HDR student owns the patent or the legal right to what they've studied. If somebody has hacked and stolen that information, it's difficult to find out who has done it and whether or not they have copied it and then essentially monetized whatever your IP is. And that's why it's important to protect that information and be aware, particularly in terms of cyber threats, to make sure that information isn't stolen. If this does happen, you can reach out to our team and we can investigate potential avenues to go down with you. Myself, I have a background in international law as well, so maybe that'll be useful, maybe not. But we're definitely here to help staff and support staff in case anything does come up.
Yeah.
That's great. We might stop sharing the slides and then we can open it up for discussion. Thank you both very, very much. I mean, I think that from the nursing and midwifery, school nursing midwifery perspective, we're obviously not developing drone technology or highly sort of sensitive, security or engineering structures. So we're probably a little bit less vulnerable, but the big area we are very vulnerable, and you pointed out some good examples, is predatory journals. And just to kind of remind everyone, as a result of our own experiences, we have developed a policy around our high degree research students' quality of publications, and we now insist that the majority of those 4 publications are in Q1, with a minimum of 1 being down to Q3 minimum, so nothing less. And this is a way of really ensuring that we don't have our students publishing in predatory journals. So that's something we've done in the school in order to really try and tackle that increasingly serious issue. And I don't know about other people, but I wake up every morning to sometimes up to 10 emails inviting me to publish in their journals, and they're very, very clever. Sometimes it'll just be one word they've changed that looks like a prestigious journal with one word changed, and if you're not really onto it, you may get fooled with some of these invites.
And very much predatory journal emails. We've had a few staff that have reached out to us recently with emails from what do seem like legitimate sources, but with either a sentence saying, sorry, I couldn't email you from my professional account, there's an issue, so I had to email this from Google, or sorry about the link, it's slightly different. And it's not that we don't have faith in staff to be aware of these types of things, but they do get very clever. Scammers get very clever. And again, if somebody steals your IP or steals your writing, it's incredibly difficult to reclaim that back. So again, just being careful about taking care of your own IP and making sure that you aren't accidentally engaging in practices that would detriment your own academic career and research.
And it's not just predatory journals, it's predatory conferences. And I imagine that has a different type of vulnerability as well regarding what can be, potentially harvested or, exposed to during a conference compared to a journal article. Yeah. So any questions from people, any answers to some of those questions that Shaista proposed as well? Have you ever had an issue with a student not wanting to participate in a discussion or in a assignment due to their concerns? And have you ever had to come up with an alternative assignment? That's an interesting one.
I was going to say, Hannah, I had an interesting one a couple of weeks ago. In person-centered care, when we're talking about environmental theories of human development. And I can't remember, I think it's a macro system at the end, which is how the system of government influences you. So, we're in a liberal democracy, and so I was trying to make the point that maybe in Asia and China they have a communist system and it's different. And I noticed a Chinese student, they got really quite bristled just by even saying that. Which I thought was, and I spoke to the student afterwards and and I apologised and I said, look, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just, you spoke so well about Chinese medicine the week before, I thought, it'd be something else. And she said, oh, that's okay. She said, I really just don't know anything about it. And that's how she kind of passed it off. But it was a very uncomfortable conversation, obviously, for her. And I was surprised by that. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up.
That's interesting, Diana.
Yeah, and it's a great example. And again, this kind of feeds a little bit into this idea of passive censorship, where potentially it's not from a malicious source, but we're being much more careful about engaging with content, whether it's truthful or whether somebody may not interpret it to be truthful, just because we don't want to offend or upset students or colleagues as well. Again, not necessarily nefarious, not necessarily something that's very detrimental, but for example, when you don't feel like you can talk about a topic because you don't want a student to then be upset, that's when it does start to become a little bit more of a concern.
And I can imagine in some schools like those dealing with political sciences, I mean, that's clearly going to be a much bigger challenge for us. We might have sensitivities around certain belief systems around things like abortion, etc., that might bring other ethical conflicts where people don't want to be involved or feel they have a conscientious, objection to that material. So very interesting. Any other questions before we thank Shasta and Matthew very much? Okay, and I think the most important thing as well, the message is to always, whatever we are talking about, is to be respectful, to be very careful the tone we use and the kind of the context and emotion we put around what we're saying, but to remain brave and not be shut down if what we're talking about is about evidence and of best practice as well, which we must be able to provide our students with. Okay, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Now, everybody else, don't run away because we're about to have presentations now from Virginia and from Lisa.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Matthew
everybody.
and Shasta. Really appreciate
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
it. Okay, bye-bye. Virginia, Virginia's having a few, somebody's sharing her already. Is that you, Virginia, doing it?
That's me, yes. I thought I'd share it myself. It's just a bit easier to do that.
No problem. Just put it on full show.
Yeah, let me just see if I can do that.
Down the bottom, you were nearly at it. Right there. Next one down, next to the right, go right. Next one, that one.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's better, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Hannah. Yes, I apologise this morning. I have to use my own computer and it hasn't got a camera. So as long as you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you really clearly. And I'll let you introduce yourself and the topic, Virginia.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. So thanks for the opportunity for this SPAD funding. I was very lucky and enough to receive some SPAD funding, and I presented this at the International Congress of Midwives conference last year in Bali. It was meant to be face-to-face, but it ended up being online, of course. So today I'm going to present what I presented at the Bali conference, and it's about an innovative student-led caseloading model from a student's perspective. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors as well. So these students are from Nepean Hospital, and I actually work as associate professor. I have a conjoint position between Nepean Blue Mountain Local Health District and also Western Sydney University. So just a bit of background, a bit of quick background about the students, Bachelor of Midwifery students, and also all midwifery students. It's an ANMAC requirement that students need to follow through at least 10 pregnant women throughout their childbearing journey. So this was a student-led clinic model of care where the students worked in pairs, and they worked across, there's only 4 of them, and they backed each other up for their birth, and they organised all their own rosters and worked as a team under the supervision of the clinical midwifery educator in the antenatal clinic. So just a bit of background for those of you who aren't midwives. Our midwifery philosophy very much underpins woman-centred care, and the woman usually develops a very good, trustworthy relationship with the midwife, and individual women's needs are very much considered in this model of care. And that goes across all midwifery models of care. So some previous caseload models have been published. The Cosmos trial, McLaughlin and al. In 2012 published that, and they showed that there were more normal vaginal births, less epidurals, less episiotomies, and also less admissions to special care nurseries and NICUs. And the other one was the Mango trial, and that was led by Tracy et al. In 2013, and they showed decreased numbers of elective caesarean sections and also reduced cost. Excuse me. So the setting, as I said, was introduced at Nepean Hospital. We have 4,000 births annually, and it was introduced because there was increasing difficulty of placing the Bachelor of Midwifery students to achieve their continuity of care experiences for low-risk women. And if the women become high risk throughout their pregnancy, they can actually continue to follow the women through their childbearing journey. It's a unique combination of students working together from 2 universities. So the 4 students work together in their final 12 months of their undergrad Bachelor of Midwifery program. And this was approved in 2018. So the aim of our study was to explore students' experiences and the level of satisfaction about this student-led midwifery model of care, and to also explore the effect of this model of care for the student as they transitioned into maternity workforce as a new graduate. So we advertised in the antenatal clinics, and we also recruited the students, obviously, with the help of the clinical midwifery educator. So for their 3rd year, they need 5 COCs, and these students actually gained 10 COCs, and the ANMAT requirement is that they need to see the woman at least 4 times antenatally, twice in the postnatal period, and for the majority of labour and birth. It was a pilot study, and as it was introduced, 3 years before we actually did this ethics study, we used a survey, and we also did interviews. We purposefully sampled the students. So we sent them a short survey at the end of this final year, and then we also did an in-depth interview with them at the end of their year, and also 6 to 9 months rather into their new grad year. We interviewed them again. So today I'm just going to provide you some results. So we used qualitative analysis. Of course, we used thematic analysis, Brown and Clark's thematic analysis, and this we developed themes and sub-themes in this way. So I'm just going to present some of the results to you now. So the students identified the significance of the continuity of care model. They highlighted the importance of seeing the woman regularly, having the opportunity to develop a relationship with the woman and her family, and the impact of the model in providing the best possible care for the woman. It was further apparent that the students experienced significant personal satisfaction and joy from being able to provide continuity of care to women, journeying alongside the woman at such an important time in their lives. The students also identified the importance of their relationships with the woman in order to develop their skills as midwives, but to also empower the woman to make informed decisions about their care that were respected and heard. The students acknowledged their responsibility in being able to inform the woman and identify her needs and desires for her pregnancy and birth. They needed to be able to care for the woman, educate, advocate, and empower her. The students identified the importance of their relationships with their fellow students working within the student-led model of care, and they reported their peers were significant sources of support and knowledge throughout the year, and they learnt much from each other. They further highlighted the importance of strong communication amongst the group, having similar goals and values, and the need for peers to assist to cover each other when crises occurred. The students reported benefits about working with the same midwife throughout the placement, explaining that it provided them with an opportunity to work consistently with someone who knew them well and their capabilities. They explained that the senior antenatal midwife assisted them to grow as practitioners by placing confidence in them and encouraging them to be independent and self-assured. A further benefit the students highlighted was the ability to debrief with the same midwife, even if the birth or the situation occurred the week before. The graduate midwives believed that the student-led model of care assisted them in developing skills in relating to women with diverse backgrounds and enabled them to place the woman at the centre of their care despite not working in a continuity of care model. Even though they were working as shift midwives, they tried to incorporate the values of continuity of care in their 8-hour shifts. They aspired to working in a continuity of care model in the future after having some further years of experience as new midwives. Students further explained that the continuity of care and the relationships that they were able to develop with the women further increased their own confidence, expertise and commitment in providing care for the women, and increased the confidence of the other midwives in the birth unit and the women themselves to enable the students to provide the care independently. Students explained that it was an unusual experience on their placement to be given so much trust and respect in the birth unit, but because of the nature of the student-led model of care, and the experience it afforded the students, the midwives knew the students had supported women through their births previously and could work more independently. This level of autonomy and feeling like an expert led students to question practices in the antenatal clinic and in the birth unit, striving to understand and ensure that any intervention provided to the woman was essential and beneficial. This also reportedly led to students supporting women in advocating for what they wanted, adhering to their birth plan in a safe and educated manner. The students recalled the privilege it was for them to be able to journey alongside the woman throughout the antenatal period, birth, and the postnatal period. They reported how this journey was personally rewarding and satisfying. One challenge of the placement, though, that all 4 students identified was finding and maintaining an appropriate work-life balance. This involved being able to attend university, complete assessments, fulfil commitments to the placement, include being on call and sustaining their roles and connections with their own family and friends. The students also wanted to share lessons they had learnt from their experience on the placement, including the need for an effective support network, the importance of self-care, and finding a way to be able to disengage from what occurs on placement and step back into their own personal life without long-term consequences. Students also identified the benefits of reflecting and debriefing, identifying important moments they have experienced, and reflecting on the practices of the hospital and midwifery as a whole. Students being able to recognise the importance of reflection and grieving throughout some critical incidents was evident. Each of the students reported the placement was invaluable in consolidating skills learned and helping to unite everything they had learnt throughout their degree in a meaningful, practical and holistic way. The students reported they utilised the experience to ask as many questions as possible and to practice skills for a woman's care throughout the pregnancy journey. Importantly, students identified the benefits of the placement in preparing them to transition from midwifery student to midwifery graduate, having developed crucial skills, gained valuable experiences and developed into the midwife clinician that they wanted to be. The new graduate midwives reported that it was easier to transition to being registered midwife as a result of their experience in this student-led model of care, and they felt more trusted by other registered midwives. The new graduates believed that this model of care enabled them to harness their skills more effectively into transitioning into a new graduate, as the leap was not as onerous as if they had not had this experience. I'm just going to share you some quick quantitative results. So as you can see, they mostly felt that this student-led model of care was really beneficial, and they felt really supported throughout the placement with the clinical midwifery educator. They were much more relaxed on an average day, and they were really satisfied and felt privileged to have worked in this model of care. And so then I guess now we've just made a revision to Women in Birth, and we've just sent that back in the last few weeks, and hopefully this will get published in the next few months. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Virginia.
That's okay.
Maybe if you stop sharing.
I will, yeah.
And I'll just open the floor for questions for Virginia. Questions or comments? Just in case people don't know what SPAD is, SPAD is an award that can be given to staff for attending conferences or workshops. And the idea is that you engage and you network, you get your information out, you form international and national collaborations as a result of this. Now, obviously, Virginia didn't have that opportunity because a lot's been online of late, but that's one of the big purposes behind SPAD. The other thing is we've been set a increased benchmark now to have significant numbers of our publications to have an international collaborator on them. So we really do need to start to up our collaborations with other researchers on publications and research we do.
And I also received the same funding the same year to present at the Trans-Tasman Conference too last year. So that was a great opportunity too. And that was online as well. So, and that was another project. So yeah, it was great. I encourage you all to apply for it because it is a great opportunity.
If you're not, you can't apply for it if you receive funding in a director position or in a ACCA or in an ACCA position, etc. You can't, if you receive school funding because of your position, you're not eligible. But otherwise, I really do encourage you to apply. Okay, we might move on to Lisa then, unless there are any other questions. Just congratulations, Virginia, and it's good to see that good to see that result. So now over to Lisa. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. You're on mute.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm in same as Virginia. So I received the SPED funding, which is Scholarly Productivity and Academic Development. That's the full name. So I received the SPED funding last year to attend the 18th National Nurse Education Conference, again, which is supposed to be face-to-face, but because of COVID, is virtual, like it's online conference. And this is a topic I have presented in the conference. It's motivating nursing students to learn in the era of COVID-19. Okay, put it down here. So I should minimize it. Okay, so in fact, I have cut the slides. I mean, 1/3 of the slides that I have cut because the original presentation was 15 minutes and today is 10 minutes. Anyway, that's what the schedule of my presentation. I will look at the impact of COVID-19 on nursing education, and then the strategies, results, and then conclusion. But it will be a really brief and short one. So for the impact, like last year when I presented, it was the third wave of COVID, but my presentation is mainly like deal with the first year of COVID when we are here. So this is the first semester. I think we can still remember in March, we quickly switched everything from face-to-face to online. And then the second semester as well, we have to like stay at home, I mean, work from home and do the online classes. So because of COVID, like we had advices from the Vice Chancellor to work from home, students not attending campus, and all the student support services need to move online or over the phone. So everything will be online from March 2020. So we have to switch everything within a really short time frame, but at the same time, we have to continue to support our students, and therefore motivate the students to learn in a virtual space is very important. So I'll just like briefly tell some of the strategies that we have to do to cope with the pandemic. So we have to do a lot of lecture ports in the Viewed side. So it's good that today Diana and Aileen is here because like I was talking about the second semester when I was a deputy subject coordinator for the mental health unit, which is the first year. So Diana and Aileen and I work as a really good team. We made a good team together to work for new lecture ports. And then Aileen made all the beautiful PowerPoint slides, and then Diana updating everything. So we work together pretty well. And for some of the clinical skills subjects, because there's no class in the practical room, so staff have to make simulation videos, and we're using Zoom video conferencing in teaching and learning, and also group and individual student consultation. Then we have to make use of these online discussion forums, emails, phone calls, whatever we can to support our students. And all the assessment tasks are being switched online. For example, some of the presentation in the class, we have to ask students to submit their video instead of like presenting in the class. So maybe you can still remember this video.
Is there meant to be sound, Lisa? There's no sound coming through. Lisa, there's no sound.
Sorry, I didn't know that there's no sound. But can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Anyway, doesn't matter. That video was in fact we used in every subject, putting in the website, advising students how to attend the online class. So the other strategy is we try to share our clinical experience and also put real life examples, like patients or in the communities, to help students to put to put theory and knowledge into practice. And in order for the students to prepare for their tutorials, we have pre-readings for them, and then we have developed online quiz. And students have to read all the materials and then they have to attempt all the quiz before attending the tutorial. So so in such a way, all students do all the pre-readings, which is pretty good. And students, because of not able to come to campus, they feel isolated and lack of peer support. Especially, I think we can still remember the first year student who didn't really enjoy their uni life for the because of COVID. They just came to the campus for the first three weeks, and then they have to stay home. And therefore, we have a group assessment task for them, so that they can have some interactions between the students. And for the first tutorial, we set up the online group for them using the breakout rooms. And then we have been teaching them 6 steps to set up a really good online group to work together. First, we ask them to introduce themselves and to break the ice, to talk about their experience or to talk about their background, so that they know each other. And then we ask them to organize regular meetings, and we suggest them to have the meeting right after the tutorials, because most of the time they will clear their days to attend the class. And then we ask them to set up some house rules. And we also ask them to look at the strengths and weaknesses of individual team members, so that when they do a group work, they know who is good at design, or who is the one good at typing, or who is the one good at searching information. And then we ask them to choose leaders among them, not only one, but for example, one for setting up reminders, the other one for overlooking or putting reminders to do to submit the tasks and things like this. And also we ask them to set baby goals, baby steps each time, so that they can have sense of accomplishment and so that they can be motivated until the group work finish. And the last but not least, we ask them to look after each other. If they have spotted anything unusual in the team members, we ask them to let the tutors know so that we can follow up, especially for the first year student. So the results of these strategies. And so this is mainly focused on the mental health unit that Aileen and Diana and I were teaching. So we got really good comments from the students in the Zoom sections, in the student feedback survey, and received thank you emails from the students showing their appreciation. And the group assessment tasks turned out to be a really good one. They have really good teamwork and they made friends with each other. And for the online quiz, it increased the participation of the students during the tutorial, so that they did generate a lot of good discussion during the class. And comparing with the last years, Diana said there's a great improvement in the students' results in the final exam. And therefore, it is good to promote the use of quiz before the tutorial, so that all the students are well prepared. And maybe I'll let you read it. So these are some of the positive feedback we have from the students in the student feedback survey. I think one good thing is they are treating their tutors as a nice person, caring, kind, confident, well-knowledge. And it's very important for us to share the examples, real-life examples, and also our clinical experience to them. And it's nice to know that they said that the tutors are kind and respectful, which is great. So the conclusion is, so I think as nurse educators, we would really like to nurture the next generation of the new nurses, the new blood, with passion and also with skills to care for our patients. And therefore, as a nurse educator, we have to be a good role model. We have to show our passion and endeavors to teach and to support them. We have to show them that we're kind, caring, and respectful. And it is not only student-centered, but we are treating them as a person. So it's a person-centered approach. And we hope that in future, they are not treating their patient as patient, but as a person, using person-centered approach instead of patient-centered approach. So at the end of 2020, the Deputy Vice Chancellor and the Vice President Academic have proposed a COVID teaching commendations, and students can nominate the teachers to be to this award. And you know what? In our School of Nursing and Midwifery, we have 17 staff being nominated, which is really great. And I'm lucky to be one of those being nominated by the students for COVID teaching commendations in appreciation of the outstanding teaching. But last but not least, it is very important for all of us to work as a team. So I would like to thank Diana and Aileen to be good team members in the teaching team. And we did enjoy, although COVID is not something we enjoy, but the switch from face-to-face to online classes is a great success. Okay, that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's so interesting.
Welcome.
If you stop sharing now,
Yeah.
we can open up to questions. Any questions for Lisa? I have a question, Lisa. Is it
Yes.
still ongoing now? Do you still continue the same process now?
Yes, we are. And I think quizzes is something really good that we can use for the tutorials, so that all the students have to do the quiz before they come to the tutorial. It's part of the assessment, so they're well prepared, more participative, and they did have good discussion. During the tutorial because they're well prepared.
Because that is one of the most frustrating parts, isn't it? When students come and they've not read anything, they've not looked at the online lecture, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, no, but if there's a quiz, before the tutorial, which is great. Yeah. So we did that, Diana and I and Aileen did everything in a really quick manner to make sure that it happened. Yeah.
I think we all did everything in a quick manner when COVID happened, didn't we?
Yes, it's true. Yeah. But we made a good team. Aileen and Diana is a really good person to work with. Yeah. Thanks, both of you.
Congratulations on all those that received commendations, including yourself, Lisa.
Oh, thank you. But we got 17 staff, which is really good, amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. When you think of the size of the nursing cohort, it's so immense what you guys deal with compared to midwifery. It's such a different situation.
Mm.
So we got a clap from Anna Williams. Any other questions for Lisa?
Thanks, Anna.
Otherwise, we might end now. I just want to let you know that the next the Dean's Seminar in September, which I think was going to be on the 20, Sarah, was it the
27th?
It was going to be on the
15th.
15th. It's now going to be on the 27th, and we'll have a special speaker, Rob Siege, from an international speaker who will be very worthwhile talking to. He's going to be talking about hope and resilience, and boy, do we need a good dose of that, don't we, after the more than 2.5 years of what we've been through. So we'll soon send out details for everybody to get engaged with that. So thank you, everyone.